Nigel very kindly introduced me. My name's Victoria Eveleigh, but most people on Exmoor know me as Torty, which is my nickname, actually short for tortoise, but we won't go there. First and foremost, I farm in partnership with my husband Chris at West Ilkeston Farm near Linton, but I also love writing, and some of you may have seen my articles in the Exmoor magazine, and I've also written several books. And these are them. I started off self-publishing before getting a book deal with the publisher Orion, which is now a part of the Hachette Group. My series of 5 Katie books is set on Exmoor. Midnight on Lundy, now published by Jane Badger Books, is set on Lundy, which I hope you don't mind for the purposes of this talk. I'm countering of honorary Exmoor like it is in the Exmoor magazine, and the Joe trilogy is just set somewhere in rural England, so we can pretend it's set on Exmoor, but it's set nowhere in particular. I know the title of this talk is Writing the Darkness, but I hope you don't mind if I talk first about writing in the darkness. This photo illustrates why I almost always write in the darkness. At night there are fewer distractions, like horses popping in for a chat, and I can keep going for as long as I like. When writing is going well, you can become engulfed in the world you've created and lose all sense of time. I believe psychologists call this flow, and it happens when people become totally absorbed in something they enjoy. It's quite a hard state to reach, and it can vanish in an instant if the phone rings or there are any distractions. So writing when most normal people are asleep is ideal for me. Incidentally, the aerial view on the wall is of Lundy, which I expect a lot of you realise, which is a very special island to me, not least because Chris and I had our honeymoon there, and we've made very good friends with several people over the years. Diana Keith, who used to own the island, told me that the Celts thought of it as another world or holy island, which formed a gateway between this world and the next. It was sort of the place where you went between when you died and when you went on to the spirit world of your relatives. Lundy was thought to be a land of enchantment where time passed at a different speed and stories never ended. Mystics could travel there through meditation, and artists enter and return to share their visions. So I think that's a lovely idea, and often when I look at that photo, it helps me get in the zone. Well, bringing us back to Exmoor as well, of course, Coleridge was famously interrupted by a person on business from Porlock and detained by him above an hour when he was writing Kubla Khan. It made him forget the dream that inspired the poem, which by his account remained unfinished as a result. So very important not to be distracted when you're writing, basically. Here's another idealized country cottage, isn't it? How can nighttime and darkness be when writing? Well, for a start, it can add another dimension to your characters. Darkness changes the pace of life and can also change the behavior of people in unexpected ways. I can think of one farmer, a neighbor who sadly is no longer with us, who was shy and solitary during the day, but came alive after dark and loved a good party, especially if there was a sing-song involved. Other people, like this farmer, my husband, are very active during the day and then have a job to stay awake once darkness falls. I was going to say that where people sleep and who they sleep with can tell you a lot about them too, but I better not. Stories often include some sort of race against time, and the approach of darkness can be really useful deadline in this respect. Here we're racing to get our hay in before nightfall, but a lot of other things are made much more difficult when darkness falls, including searching for people and animals. Of course, darkness can be scary. Most of us rely heavily on sight, so it's frightening if we can't see. Other senses tend to take over and we become super sensitive in an attempt to compensate for our lack of vision. Our imagination often plays tricks on us, and it isn't always easy to separate fantasy from reality. I don't write horror or ghost stories, but it's no wonder they make full use of darkness. Even if you're not writing fantasy, as an author, you can heap adversity onto your core characters by creating a situation that would be much easier to cope with in daylight. For instance, as if darkness, a flood, and stranded horses weren't enough, I added a thunderstorm for Joe to battle through in Joe and the Race to Rescue. But that wasn't entirely my fault. Creating a front cover using a scene set in darkness is bound to be challenging. And there were several versions of this book cover before my publisher, the artist Angelo Rinaldi, and I settled for this one. A torch, which I'd written into the story, as you can see, can provide some light, but backlighting is much more effective. So I had to write lightning into the story. Also, I had originally made Sherman, the Shire horse in the picture, black, because we used to have a Sherman called Shire horse, a Shire horse called Sherman who was black. However, I had to change him to grey because a black horse in a dark scene didn't stand out enough. There were various other little things as well. And then there was the hat. This isn't exactly to do with darkness, but I think it's interesting. So although it was fine for Joe to be riding a huge cart horse without any sort of tack through a raging flood in a thunderstorm, it would have been seen as dangerous and irresponsible for him not to have been wearing a riding hat. So that's why he's wearing a riding hat on this book cover. For most of us, the sanctuary of our own bed is very comforting. So any departure from that can take us away from our comfort zone and lead to change. That's a useful device for an author. A good nighttime adventure for children can be staying overnight in another house, whether it's sleepover at a friend's house or a holiday somewhere different. And an excellent nighttime adventure, of course, is camping. If there are campfires and toasted marshmallows into the bargain, it's a gold standard, of course. This extract from Midnight on Lundy was inspired by the night when I took this photo on the I'll just read it for you quickly. Jenny waited by the heavy oak door of the church while Ben went in to get her mysterious gift. He returned holding a parcel. "Let's go outside," he whispered. "Okay," Jenny whispered back, wondering why it didn't seem right to talk normally in church. They walked a short distance and then Ben sat down on the grass. Jenny sat down beside him on spongy turf. The moon bathed everything in a silvery light, washing out all normal colours. They sat there in companionable silence. Music drifted up from the tavern. In the distance, intermittent flashes came from lighthouses dotted along the North Devon coast. Jenny couldn't think of anywhere she'd rather be. Ben seemed to have the habit of making days perfect. Darkness allows intimacy that could feel embarrassing by day. Midnight on Lundy is aimed at readers from about 8 years upwards, so this scene is just about a deepening friendship. Nothing more than that. Writing a sex scene is something I've never had to do, thank goodness. But of course they happen in the darkness too. Incidentally, when Rob Wilson North talked about how the lighthouse on the Welsh coast used to be the only visible light from Glenthorne, and now there's a constant glow from the Welsh coast, it reminded me of this photo, which shows 3 lighthouses along the North Devon coast. It took some taking that. There were several takes before I managed to get them all flashing at the same time. And a full moon from a viewpoint outside the church on Lundy. And the 3 lighthouses, if anybody's interested, are Bull Point, Instow and Hartland Point. Friends in South Wales tell me the Exmoor and North Devon coast is pretty boring, with hardly any lights or big centres of population. Long may that continue. Wonderful things can happen at night as well, including new life, which Holly Purdy talked about in her excellent presentation about life on the farm. This was our mare Rosie giving birth to her first foal, Winaway, which Chris and I had to help. Our daughter Sarah was 13 at the time. We woke her up to see the newborn foal, so she's wearing wellies and an outdoor jacket over the top of her nightclothes. I was thinking of this moment when I wrote the scene about Katie seeing her ex-born pony Trifle's newborn foal for the first time in Katie's Pony Surprise. The most magical night of all for a lot of people, especially children, is the night before Christmas. Several books I've written feature Christmas and Christmas Eve. I love it, and I also can't help thinking of all the other people celebrating Christmas in different ways and wondering how, what everybody else in the world is doing, or Christians anyway, or people who celebrate Christmas. In our family, there's a tradition passed on from Chrissy's father that if you go out to the farmyard at midnight and listen carefully, you'll hear the animals talking to each other. So I'll finish with this passage near the end of Katie's Pony Surprise. They ate, drank, talked and played games until the evening turned into the night. Dad always says that the farm animals talk at midnight on Christmas Eve, don't you, Dad? Katie's dad said as he dealt some cards. Dean laughed. Nothing would surprise me in this magical place. What do they say, Jack? Ah, that's something you'll have to find out for yourself, Grandpa replied. It was nearly midnight when the guests left. Katie went outside to check her ponies. They were all fine. Good night, Trifle, my wonderful, clever pony, she said. Good night, little Tinkerbell. Good night, Jacko, my handsome boy. Happy Christmas. As Katie turned to go, she was sure she heard Trifle say, a happy night. Well, it was Christmas Eve, so anything was possible. Thank you.